this Jordy Visser piece, Bitcoin's IPO moment. I'm curious if you guys have any interesting takes you want to share on that. And definitely relatedly, Checkmate had an interesting graphic where he showed this idea of revived supply, which is changing hands. These two concepts are obviously very related. So maybe we can get into this a little bit. Brady, do you want to preview it, or it doesn't matter to me?
No, please do.
Okay, so this is Checkmatey on Twitter, as you guys probably know him. So he has been doing on-chain analysis. He also gets referred to as Check on Chain. He's been doing on-chain analysis for a long, long time, and he put out this post on Twitter X recently and pointed out just the large amounts of Bitcoin that. And remember, this is when they move on chain. It's not, you can't observe just on the blockchain that someone is definitively selling Bitcoin, but you can make some assumptions about what they're doing with it. And then you also say, okay, when did the last time the Bitcoin moved before that? And, you can turn it into a nice looking graph. So what you can see here is the revived supply by year just dramatically increased in not only 2025, and actually one of the things that stood out to me was how big this was in the year 2024. If you would have asked me to just guess, I would have thought, and maybe I'm leaning too heavy on the Twitter narratives right now, but if you go on Twitter, every other post is about some OGs selling and suppressing the price, right? Or not suppressing, but just being a drag on the price. And the data that he's put together does reflect that in 2025. But I think it's interesting that in 2024, there was a massive amount of selling as well. And for anyone just looking at the colors here, so he buckets it. If it's the purple bucket, it's coins that are moving for the first time in over 10 years. If it is blue, it's coins that are moving for the first time in 7 to 10 years. And then green is the first time coins are moving in 5 to 7 years. So this is meant to be like old coins moving. And he calls it total 5-year plus revived supply. And the total is 52 billion in 2025. And it was actually slightly higher for the year 2024. But anyway, I thought it was a good chart, nicely done by Checkmate. And I think it does reinforce this narrative of there is a huge rotation of longer term holders. We can all debate what it means to be an OG, but longer term holders appear to be diversifying, selling, whatever they're doing with it. But that does seem to be a drag on the price. And then it also gets into that Jordy Visser article that this is reminiscent of what it means to be an IPO. Earlier investors took big risks in a company. The IPO, initial public offering, is other people, more distributed investors and holders coming in to hold that investment. So his article was shared very, very widely on Twitter and elsewhere. So just wanted to bring up those 2 points and chat about it with you guys a little bit. Any takeaways initially just from kind of seeing that data, or if you read that article, Lyn? Do you think this is a narrative that does hold weight in terms of affecting Bitcoin's price?
So I think significantly yes, but I would have some caveats. So one is like in that chart you showed, one of the challenges, of course, is that's in dollar figures. And as Bitcoin gets much larger, of course, the dollar figures for almost everything are going to increase. And if you notice, like the spikes were during major bull markets. So 2017, then 2021, and then 2024. These were kind of periods of major new highs. And what happens historically, we have kind of data of this going back to like 2011, kind of every major bull cycle in Bitcoin's history, is that you get selling pressure from longer term holders when you're kind of reaching new highs and that there's plenty of liquidity to sell into. If you try to sell into a weak market, you get a lot of price slippage. If you're a meaningful whale and you're trying to sell, you generally want to sell into a bull market to kind of sell, and your coins are easily bought by new buyers. I do think that the narrative like the IPO is correct, but it's not unique to the cycle, which is to say that there's some aspects unique to the cycle, but basically you do get that kind of gradual distribution from very early adopters, much like a startup company becoming, a publicly traded, widely held entity. And basically the difference is that Bitcoin is not a security and it's always been public, but you still get that kind of same sort of investor behavior where you get, kind of super high signal early adopters, and then you get kind of people come later. They've seen more patterns of it. They've had time to kind of analyze it. They have less explosive upside potential, but also generally less risk by the time that they buy in. And one way to kind of capture this is like people that have been holding for many years are often up 5, 10 times or more, depending on how long they've been holding. It could be many times more. Many of them have, they've aged a number of years. Many of them have families that they didn't have when they started hodling. Many people want to just upgrade their consumption patterns. Some people get nervous by having, what has grown to maybe 90% of their net worth or more in an asset, and they might still love the asset, but they might say, well, there's no other asset I'd even put 10% of my net worth in. I got 90% of my worth in this one. Maybe I want to go down to 50. So I'm
Yeah.
still bullish, but maybe I'm not, betting the farm anymore on one thing that they could chop around and do all sorts of stuff. So you get any number of reasons that are pretty valid for people kind of distributing. Sometimes you also have someone that distributes back to themselves, which is they say, I've been self-custodying, what is like now millions of dollars. And maybe I still want to self-custody a bunch of it, but maybe I don't want to self-custody all of that. And so you get kind of potentially selling into ETFs or treasury companies that then that same individual or group continues to hold just in a different form, which can potentially give them kind of different types of liquidity access and stuff like that. And so I do think what's different with this cycle is that you do have, I mean, obviously the ETFs and the treasury companies present new opportunities for the types of selling and distribution that can occur. But I think this is part of a broader kind of pattern that happens, and I think will continue to happen in every major bull cycle. It's kind of part of that natural distribution process, and that's also why I tend to be on the bearish side of bullish all the time, which is you people keep saying things like it's going to be like there's going to be a shortage of coins. There's all this buying pressure, and there's so few coins on exchanges or so few coins XYZ. But the variable that always surprises people for some reason is that when you do go up multiple times, you get selling into that. And I think we've entered the phase, and we're going to continue to be in the phase where it's not new mining supply that really kind of impacts price. It's the question is at what price can you unlock, tightly held coins or previously tightly held coins to get them circulating. And so you have all the different demand sides, liquidity, regulatory changes, perceptions of the asset, all that type of stuff is on the demand side, and the supply side is basically either, for the most part, it's older holders selling into strength and liquidity. That's the most common, and then in rare moments you get these longer term holders selling into fear. So, for example, that kind of bottom in 2018, you had a rare OG selling into weakness moment. There are a couple of moments like that can happen as well.
The bear whale.
Yeah, you get kind of capitulations, but for the most part, it's older holders selling into periods of strength, and distributing the coins.
All right.
I do just thought of one kind of random thing. I did like a line on Twitter. Someone said who was kind of defending the early holders selling, because we have these line, never sell your Bitcoin and things like that, which they're fun taglines, and I get there's truth to them, and it is good to instill that you're saying, hey, people, this is a long-term asset. Hold it for the long term is probably for your benefit. But I did like someone had a quip that was like, don't get mad at the OGs doing what you yourself plan to do in 5 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no such thing as like the supply of Bitcoin. It doesn't run out. This is a market. There's buyers and sellers. New sellers emerge as the price changes, as people's information and life situations change. So that is how markets work.